What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Everything in Poderation, where sometimes the internet can be too much. My name is Colin Sparling, and I like to look at cursed memes. I'm joined by Daily Wilhelm.
I'm Daily Wilhelm, and I like to look at deep fried memes.
And I'm Robert. I'm a spooky ghost in this episode. It's Halloween.
Halloween's happening.
He's gonna talk like that the entire time. Just
Maybe not all the time.
In case you couldn't tell, welcome back to a very Halloween edition of Everything in Poderation. Today we thought we would take this lovely opportunity during the spooky season to talk to you about none other than creepypastas.
That's my favorite Italian dish. Now that joke's out of the way, which is good.
Gruesome stromboli. It's my fave.
Stromboli.
I'm sure Kraft mac and cheese came out with like some sort of skull-shaped macaroni, knowing them.
Oh, probably.
Oh, I love
something.
Their shapes. They do shapes every year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, SpongeBob ones are the best.
And that's why with this episode, we're going to talk about the spookiest thing of all, the U.S. election in 4 days.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I guess it is in 4 days.
Oh, well, no, we're releasing this a little before Halloween, so it's in a few more days. But
well,
it's scary.
Yeah, but
It's
recording
very
and
scary.
timelines and all that stuff. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about creepypastas today. So, in case you didn't know, creepypastas are a thing that started out on the internet. They are fun little short horror stories that people would write on the internet, and they would get shared around. People would copy and paste them everywhere, hence the name. Because creepypasta is a play on copy pasta, which is a play on copy and paste. Ooh, learn compound words, fun.
now, learning, that's spooky.
Yeah.
Now that's
learning.
wow. The real
That's
horror was the lessons we learned all along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I did a little bit of research into the origins of this spooky, fun pastime that is creepypastas, and that ended up actually being a huge influence on a lot of different parts of the internet and spawned several different mediums, movies, games, whatnot. And I don't know how much you guys know about the history of creepypastas, but I do have a couple of fun bullet points. So the first recorded creepypasta was actually one called Ted the Caver, and it was posted on 4chan all the way back in 2001. And what really surprised me about this was I didn't know 4chan existed back in 2001. That was probably the most surprising thing to me.
Wait, really?
We're gonna say it a lot, but that's the real scary. Is that 4chan has been around this long?
Yeah, I had no idea 4chan had been a lot. I didn't hear about 4chan until 2011, I think.
Yeah, no, that illustrious hacker 4chan, as some people would call him, on the CNNs.
Oh yeah, the singular 4chan.
Wait, is that a real thing? Did somebody actually?
Yeah, no, there were real journalists on real life actual TV who said that there was the one hacker known as 4chan.
Oh no!
Oh god, I'm gonna have to see a video of this
y'all.
now. That's great.
Gotta love alternative facts, my friend.
And then the term as we know it today, creepypasta, was actually coined in 2007, also on 4chan. So 4chan is a pretty common thread throughout this whole thing. And then the ideas of writing creepypastas, a lot of those posts and things like that started originating on the actual creepypasta website, creepypasta.com, which debuted in 2008. And then eventually spawned SCP's Foundation, among many, many, many other things. So yeah, that's basically the basis for creepypastas.
And that was it too. No one wrote any creepypastas after 2009. And really we're just digging up some really old decrepit relics of the internet.
Yeah,
That's how that works, right? Right? No.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, one of the biggest things with creepypastas now is because right now it's like a pretty contentious thing with artists getting their art stolen and stuff like that, or reposted without being credited and things like that. And I mean, people used to post creepypastas back in the day just completely anonymously. They would get copy and pasted, no credits to like the original, writer or anything like that. But nowadays, in the still thriving creepypasta community, it's like heavily frowned upon to ever copy and paste someone else's work, and without crediting them. So
yeah, it's funny. I mean, I want to start at like where creepypasta before it was creepy, it was just copy, right? It was copypasta. And I love how with copypasta there's the constant like I don't think anyone really knows who first wrote the "Do you know who I am? I have over 300 confirmed kills, etc., etc."
Oh
Navy
my
SEAL
God.
thing. Like
yes,
I don't think like there's no like, oh yeah, that copypasta written by Ronald Dalton, right? Like that's not a thing. But with where we are with creepypasta now, I know there are some creepypasta writers who have written like real books that have been really published, like in real life. Like you can hold them in your hands.
that's
Man.
that's really cool. I mean, like there was, especially after the creepypasta website became a thing, that's when people started being a little bit more strict about like making sure you credit people. People were actually posting like either under pseudonyms or under their real name. Like for instance, like Slender, which is probably one of the most famous creepypastas there is, was actually, you could track that all the way back to being written by a dude by the name of Eric Knudsen, who we'll talk about a little bit more later. But yeah, so I think the interesting thing about creepypastas is, in a lot of different places they have their mythos and their urban legends and stuff like that. But the thing about urban legends is usually it's really hard to trace exactly where they start, right? And having like a concrete, like, what started this? What are the actual facts behind this? Is it fact or fiction? With creepypastas, it's just like, yeah, the dude posted it on 4chan. It was a non on 4chan, or it was this guy on creepypasta.com or something awful or whatever, and it's there. And now we have the complete origin story of Slender Man.
I think that's kind of the magic of it, especially early creepypastas like Jeff the Killer and Slender Man and like these specific figures, is because the narrative could change slightly depending on the audience, depending on who was telling it, or where they were posting it. And that's just what you do with, the classic scary stories that we've always known from oral tradition, just like the one where he's inside the house and he's pretending to be the girl's dog and licking her hand and
I've seen that one.
Like those, like the classic ones that you just know the very basic facts of, that you can then fill in as a storyteller the bonus details within that to tailor to like, oh, and you live in a 2-story house. I'm going to tell you a story about something that happened in a 2-story house to extra creep you out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed creepypasta is kind of like, it's this weird mix between, like Colin said, urban legends, but it has a very strong spooky stories around the campfire vibe. It's like the internet version of that. Like, when you're around the campfire, you put the flashlight right under your face, right? Like that whole thing. It has that vibe because it's very, word of mouth, but through the internet. So copy pasted everywhere, right? And when it has such a compelling character like Slender Man, right? So it's not just like, oh, that one story about Slender Man, but do you know of the Slender Man, right? Like, and all the creepy shit. It's like Bigfoot, right? Like there's no the legend of Bigfoot, right? There is Bigfoot. Like you just know of him.
It's like in the past week, I finally actually read the original story about the Rake, but I've known about the Rake for years, like just the general idea of like this creature man dealio. But only recently did I actually like read the story that originated it and found it wanting. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Rude.
He was scarier before I knew the details.
Well, I think that there is, it's early internet writing, a lot of it. And what I noticed was very commonly you're going to find a lot of typos and grammar errors, and especially a lot of those earlier ones. And it's just kind of all over the place, kind of messy.
There was no spell check back in the day, man.
No, it's just the Wild West. Well, so we're kind of a little bit all over the place here, but because there's just so much to talk about when it comes to the idea of creepypastas, but I kind of want to rein it in and talk about like, what is your guys' first experience with creepypastas? And we'll start with Daly.
Oh man, I have a very specific memory of like I want to say it was a birthday. It was either a Halloween party or birthday party. It could be either because there were decorations and they were spooky, and me and my friends at the time were just always into spooky. We were like pseudo goth when we were like 13. So because you can't really be goth at 13. And today, to this day, eyeliner for days, y'all. But we defaulted to let's tell scary stories, and we finally had the opportunity, like, oh, we have a computer, we could look up more scary stories, and we were just reading them out loud to each other in a dark room back and forth. And the only one I really, really remember well from that night was reading Jeff the Killer for the first time because of that picture, which for, you know, early internet was a really scary picture. I didn't know about Photoshop. I know that, you know, pictures can be manipulated, but like you weren't desensitized to heavily manipulated photos at that point. So it was spoopy. It was 3 spoopy 5 me, especially because we lived in like a cul-de-sac at the time, and you could hear like neighbors going around, and so the older kids would be like, it's Jeff's outside.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jeff the Killer is definitely like one of the bigger ones. I mean, because like he's the kind of thing where you don't even need to know the name. Like people have seen that image, right? And even if you do know, it's like it's definitely doctored. Like there's still something about it that elicits a very visceral, like, fuck that face kind of response.
Fuck that.
Yeah,
that's gonna be in my nightmares tonight.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, for me, with my first interaction with Creepypasta was probably about like 3 days ago when we decided we're going to do an episode about Creepypasta. I was like, well, I guess I should dive into it. Because, I mean, I've known of Creepypasta for the longest time, but like, I don't know. It just never spoke. It never interested me. I never felt like, oh, let's look up a scary story that some rando on the internet wrote. That's never something that I felt like doing. And now after reading a few, I still stand by that, kind of. But there are definitely some interesting creepypastas I've read. I can see why some people consider it more of like an art form.
The premise of creepypasta, that I like about it, especially if you go on some of the modern creepypasta websites now, there are vague guidelines that they actually try to follow. Like all the creepypastas that are posted have to be grounded in reality in some way, shape, or form, right? So that way they feel super believable, and that's kind of always been a staple of creepypastas, and why they kind of tend to hang with you like long after you're done reading them. Not to mention they're usually accompanied by like some sort of picture or footage or some sort of Photoshop whatever audio clip. But yeah, so I think it's just it's made to be a real visceral experience and really put yourself in that person's shoes of experience that thing. It's kind of like an extension of scary stories to tell in the dark or what have you, is what it feels like. But just like not safe for kids, even though those books were really safe for kids to begin with. But
like the illustrations, certainly, if I recall terrifying. My childhood correctly, and being terrified several times over.
I've never seen the show, but I remember seeing that clip of like a weird swamp monster looking thing coming out of a pool. And I'm like, if I were a 5-year-old watching that, fuck this show. I would break the TV.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's like a legitimate like skeleton dripping flesh, etc. And it's like,
Wait, what show is this again?
Not for kids.
The scary stories. Yeah, tell in the dark.
Wait. Talking about Goosebumps?
No, not the book series. The Canadian series that was like, I submit for the Midnight Society. This is my story.
Yeah, that one. Not Goosebumps. None of that R.L. Stine bullshit.
I'm gonna be real. I don't know if I ever saw this.
Don't.
Okay.
Don't. It's scary.
It's scary.
No. It ranged wildly, if I remember, quite like creepypastas in that way, from like just absurd dumb to like actually kind of terrifying. Like the skeleton in the pool guy was actually kind of terrifying. I think like looking back on a lot of the creepypastas that I've read, especially in review for this episode, a lot of them are kind of the absurdist, like, ooh, there's this omniscient creature that tells little girls that it's coming for you, etc. Like that's what my problem was with the rake. But then there's other ones that I remembered where I was like, oh, that really stuck with me because of the ambiguity and the oddness of it. Like the Russian sleep experiment, where it was like, and they took out their organs and laid them around. And it's just like crazy stuff that just kind of sticks with you because there really is no like explanation or like clear, like they're just trying to scare me, you know?
That's the thing, right? Is like a lot of it does kind of feel like this shit could actually happen. I mean, the Russian sleep experiment just sounds like some shit that would happen with like the Nazis in World War II or something. Like happens in some sort of Soviet lab somewhere before the Cold War. Or like, I don't know. It just sounds like, I was like, yeah, I totally believe that could happen. Why not? You know?
Yeah, so now that we're talking about the Russian sleep experiment, I do kind of want to just talk about that one because that was it was one of the more fascinating creepypastas that I've read in the past week. I do have I have to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
So
TLDR, it sticks with you, right?
It does. So TLDR, if you haven't read the Russian sleep experiment, it was what, the 60s allegedly. Some Russian experimenters took some prisoners of war, shut them in a room, and pumped it full of a gas that would keep them awake. And for a few days, they were monitoring them, and it was like, oh, these people are getting a little restless, like, you know, like you usually do when you don't sleep for 2 days, right? And then, like, after the fourth or fifth day, they went silent. And then after a week or so, they, like, looked inside and found basically, like, mangled skeleton things where they, like, took out their organs and ate their own flesh. And they're like super powered zombie things, and they just needed the gas to survive, and they don't need sleep anymore. Yada yada. It ends with the scientists like killing them in fear and all that, but the military wanted to weaponize them because, you know, military got a military. So that's a quick lowdown of it. And what I find really interesting about this one is that it does feel in some ways grounded in reality, because when you look at old Nazi shit, right? Like, aside from the murdering millions of people and minorities, if you look aside from all that, there's a lot of occult, weird shit going on with the Nazis. Like, that's kind of why Wolfenstein got weirdly, like, it felt kind of rooted in some reality, because Nazis did crazy stuff, or like Nazi zombies in Call of Duty, like, you know, it's like, okay, I could see the Nazis like looking into how to create an undead army to take over the world. That kind of makes sense.
They wanted to make an ape-man army at one point. That's a fact. That is a historical fact. They were like, what if gorilla and human combine? Let's try it.
Gorilla, the true optimal race. So yeah, when you consider that historical aspect, it's kind of not hard to translate that to, oh, I could see Soviet Russia doing that. Like, totally. And like an experiment to see what happens when people don't sleep. Oh yeah, that's like a premise I could believe, rooted in history. And then when I finished reading it, my brain went on a really long journey of like, okay, this defied my expectations. It went from weird pseudo occult to full on, we all have monsters inside of us, and society is a way for us to not only tame our own monsters, but tame other people's monsters so we can all live peacefully and in harmony. And I started drawing parallels to Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and I stopped because I was like, this is just a creepypasta. Why am I doing this with my life right now?
It's not that deep, bro. It's not that deep.
And that's why the SCP Foundation exists, man. Like, it's people they go crazy with this stuff. And I think it's that mentality, and also just the creativity that goes into all these things that kind of speaks to, like, you know, because a lot of these creepypastas, the ones that are, you know, deemed really good, they kind of just become a foundation for people to build off of. Next thing you know, you have dozens of like retellings and like pseudo sequels and just adding on to like a sort of universe. And that's how you end up with something like Slenderman, right? Like, has this huge mythos behind it.
Yeah, modern, very recent, as in like last year recent, example of that is with Siren Head. If you guys have seen him around, and you can actually trace the origins of Siren Head. Like, it was this horror artist on Twitter made Siren Head and then was like, you know what, I'm gonna make a Siren Head game. And unfortunately, someone else made a Siren Head game which is just very Slenderman-esque. There's this giant thing called Siren Head, which plays some really creepy songs, including a like broken tornado siren from Chicago, like the sound of which is just genuinely bone-chilling, chasing you through the woods. And I would like people like Markiplier, and I don't know like who else does like really big horror games. But Markiplier is always on that. PewDiePie. But yeah, he probably did that. But and so that started, that mythos has begun to spread like Siren Head. Like we'll just be on a drive and we'll see like a radio tower in the woods, and I'll be like, oh, it's Siren Head.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy that stuff is still going. I feel like in terms of kind of like big time popularity, Slenderman was sort of the peak. I feel like that's when creepypastas really were in the limelight and kind of shoved in there, partially because it had such a successful video game attached to it, and then another video game in Slender the Arrival. Those ended up blowing up like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, with Slenderman, I think if there's any creepypasta to break the shackles of creepypasta, it would be Slenderman, because there are probably people who know of Slender not even as a creepypasta. What's that? Oh, like people just wrote stories about Slenderman on the internet. Like there are people who might know of. Yeah, there's an entire Slenderman cinematic universe out there now, where that's how like people can know Slender from so many different things. Like,
we don't talk about the Slenderman movie that came out like 5 years too late.
Yeah, that too. But I mean, it was to the point where Slenderman was in mainstream news because of an attempted murder.
Yep.
So I think because we're talking about creepypastas, we also have to touch on the fandom, which fandoms are
great.
Everything in moderation, guys. It's kind of in our name. Just be a fan in moderation. You don't have to dedicate your life to something. You don't have to sacrifice someone else's life in the name of something. But damn it, if that didn't happen with a couple fans of the creepypasta universe, and they were like, we're gonna go to the Slender Mansion and hang out with Slenderman and Jeff the Killer and the Link sprite from Ben Drowned. That's who lives in the Slender Mansion if you kill your friend in the woods.
Yeah, so for like a bullet pointed version of the Slenderman attempted killing, so May 31st of 2014 in and I'm totally gonna probably mispronounce this, Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Nailed it. Got in one.
Damn. Yep. These fucking Ohio has names like this too. There was a stabbing performed by two girls on a third girl that reportedly they performed in the name of Slenderman. They did it to allegedly please Slenderman after just reading several creepypastas get really overly invested, and it ended with them hurting this girl really, really badly to the point where she needed physical therapy. And after all of it went down, the original creator of Slenderman, Eric Knudsen, actually released like an apology and everything, and just it was a whole horrific event. And I don't know, I haven't seen any updates like as like a 5 years later, 6 years later, whatever sort of story, but yeah, so that's when it could be taken too far.
Well, yeah, I think the two girls, I mean, to put this in perspective, these are like preteens or like young
adolescents. Yeah.
The two girls, I believe, went to juvie, and the third girl did survive, but with like 19 stab wounds.
Jesus.
And
yeah,
those
she
are
like
off
dragged
the cuff.
herself through the forest like until she found someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, you two might be more familiar with the Slenderman extended lore more than I am, but like, is there a point in the Slenderman stories that are like, and Slenderman like loved that his fans murdered each other to protect, to get protection or some shit like?
So one of the things with Slenderman is in his lore he can basically take control of people, or at least like coax them into performing heinous acts in order to please him, in order to get some sort of blessing, in order to I don't know what these people were necessarily offered in return. But yeah, so he would basically brainwash them into becoming like homicidal maniacs and do his bidding. Mm-hmm.
Yikes. Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly from the documentary about the stabbing and Slenderman as a whole that came out a couple years ago, it was like there were some like offshoots of like the Slenderman legend that he was a protector of children. Like that's like he was actually the person that you are in the game that most people are familiar with is supposedly an abuser, and that's what happens to abusers is that Slenderman comes and gets them and protects the children that way. So I can see where like that might be appealing for, you know, very impressionable young girls. I was an impressionable young girl at one point, and I was 3 edgy 5 me. I thought the Akatsuki was like the shit, and like me and my friends all had like the matching rings, and we did our nails like all the Akatsuki for some reason had painted nails, and we were like, oh yeah, and because it's like, ooh, they're the bad guys, and that's interesting, and I think that's what maybe attracted these girls to that lore and that fandom, and then it just it went too far. Everything in moderation, guys. And I don't think that happens like naturally. I don't think everyone's on the rails to the most extreme form of practice of your fandom, even at that age.
Yeah, and I even in my research, I like the details of the actual situation, how it went down. So you mentioned they were in the woods daily, because I don't know if I actually saw anything about that.
Yeah, they were on it was like these 3 girls, 2 of them were much closer than the other one. It was kind of like, oh, we'll like invite you over to our sleepover, and then in the morning they went over to like the local park, which has like woods around it, because like we're all from the Midwest. We know that just woods happen. Yep. They happen everywhere you go, and
everywhere
at
you
first
go,
they were
the woods happen.
The woods. That sounds like a creepypasta. That sounds like the start of a creepypasta itself.
Yeah.
But at first they were gonna do it in the like park restroom, and then they chickened out there, and so then they were like, no, we'll wait and we'll do it in the woods, and then we'll be able to find the mansion, the Slender Mansion.
Man, like they're some bent minds there, that's for sure.
I have to ask, is Slender Mansion a daily original, or is that portmanteau straight from the fandom?
Straight from the fandom. Slender Mansion is where all the creepypasta people live together. Mm-hmm. Like,
oh yeah,
evil Hogwarts.
I imagine there's a lot of fan art.
Yeah, because Slender has his mansion.
Literally, look, there is seriously fan art and stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh no.
There is, because there's a Slender Mansion right outside of Waukesha, Wisconsin, of all places. Regardless, the Slender story, especially around like 2014 when this happened, that was kind of around when it was sort of peaking, like the video games were out, you know, there was talks of a movie being made. Slender was in the public conscious for sure. Like, I mean, I think they even made like a Minecraft skin. I mean, there was costumes. I remember several people around that time for Halloween were going as Slender Man. Like, it was a big deal.
Like minimalist, not hard to cobble together costume. Morph suit and a suit. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Exactly. Or you just have the morph suit and that's it.
And even without the context, Slenderman's still scary. I think that's one of the powerful things, is that even if you don't know, like, oh, this is the guy that like snatches people up and does jump scares in front of the camera, it's still a scary dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then back in the day, like seeing all the photoshops and stuff of Slenderman that were going around the internet because of the creepypasta, I mean, those were always super entertaining. But yeah, I remember when I actually didn't even hear about Slenderman until Slender the 8 Pages, which was the first game, had come out, because that was taking the internet by storm. It's like, oh, it's just this game where you run around the woods and you pick up pieces of paper and this thing chases you down. And that's kind of the only context I had for it. And so there I was with a group of my friends and me, and we were sitting in my room, with all the lights off, just my computer to monitor, and we take turns trying to get as many pages as we could, and just getting the shit scared out of us.
Slender would eat your ass.
Yeah, Slender would eat your ass. And then Slender the Arrival came out, and that was just, I think that game was like above and beyond. I thought that game was, still to this day, it's
Explain
terrifying.
that one. I've only ever known the 8 pages. Is the Arrival, is that the more, like, it's more of a 3D world one?
Yeah, well, there's actual levels. Yeah, it's made by Blue Isle Studios, who also did like Valley and then another game that's coming out. I don't know if they're the same developers though, between them and the 8 pages, but I know Slender the Arrival ended up being like a pretty big deal at the time. Yeah, because you could actually like go inside a house and Slender Man could chase you inside the house, and there was a story and all kind. It was just way more scary than the original. But anyways, so that's pretty much the gist when it comes to the Slender Man. Am I missing anything when it comes to Slender Man?
He sucks.
It's we were both just going to say something sassy. So I was just going to say he's wearing a Hugo Boss suit because Hugo Boss was a fucking Nazi and more people should be aware of that.
Go Boss.
Thanks. Yes, that one. I'm
going for 3 of them this episode. I'm waiting for the 3rd one now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But Robert, you said like the Russian sleep experiment like definitely like fascinated you. It caught your mind. But could you, throughout all of the creepypastas we've been reading up this week, was anything like oh, that would have scared me if I was like younger or more naive?
No, I mean, probably the Russian experiment one would have creeped me out the most, because even like now as a totally mature adult who doesn't do anything childish ever, the Russian sleep experiment did kind of like make me, like a little bit like, wriggle in my skin. That's kind of weird, right? But the other ones I read, I was just like, yeah, all right. Because I've noticed creepypastas tend to do a formula. At least the big ones that I read. I'm not going to generalize all the creepypasta because I'm sure there's a ton out there, just like real pasta. But it's usually not delicious, usually a first-person account of like, I was doing something questionable or exploring a place or was in a creepy area, and then I heard a noise or something shifted around me, and I looked around, and then a creepy thing happened, or a creepy person or monster appeared, but I only saw like its foot or its arm, and then I just ran away. And that's all I know about the legend of that character. Like, I think of Abandoned by Disney is one that I was like, I heard a lot about it. I heard it's like something that a lot of people like. And, off the top, Abandoned by Disney, it's cool that the author for it, I'm forgetting his name right now, unfortunately, but he's one of those people that does have like real books out. Like, he writes real horror books now, like physical, printed, published books. But when I was reading through Abandoned by Disney, are either of you two familiar with that one?
No.
Nope.
TLDR, abandoned Disneyland somewhere not where you'd expect, like off the east coast of America, I think. Or it might have been the Bahamas. I don't remember. Abandoned Disneyland, right? That's the premise. He was exploring it. It was like, oh man, it's all decrepit and sad. And look at that old mascot and this old mascot. And then he found a locked room with animatronics or like people in mascot suits, but they weren't, you didn't think there were people in the mascot suits. Then as he explored, oh no, Mickey Mouse stood up and but it's Mickey Mouse but with inverted colors, so that's spooky. And he said something spooky and tried to take off his head, and then blood started gushing out, and then I ran away. And it's like, okay, all right,
yeah.
Sounds like Five Nights at Freddy's or something.
Yeah,
that was an inspiration. Who's to say? I do. I see more today. Russian sleep experiment-esque than I do like Abandoned at Disney-esque creepypastas when I like see like what's trending on like No Sleep or what's trending on the actual creepypasta site. And it makes me think that maybe, like us having grown up now with the internet, like the writers of creepypastas have grown up and have honed their craft and have found that the more existential stuff, like what happens without sleep, like what happens if we just like forgo sleep, which is so base to who we are as a person. Like almost Kafka-esque writing is more popular because it does like stick with you more. And I like that. I dig that a lot. Like one of
very cerebral,
this year's more psychological. Like one of this year's most popular ones that I found in a listicle, which I can link in the description below, was about like someone stuck in time. Like they were like taking some experimental pills as part of like what they thought was a pretty routine clinical trial, and it just slowed down time so much for them that like they lived 10,000 years in a day and just watched the world go by in super slow-mo, and they were just like, kill me, I just want to die, this is awful. And it's just like thinking about yourself in that situation versus thinking about yourself in a very cliche situation like I'm at an abandoned amusement park and there's mascots following me
and they bleed
and there's blood.
Yeah.
I do have this question that I want to pose, and it maybe might be getting a little too literature nerd here. I think the reason we find horror generally scary is two things. Either one, we believe it could have really happened. I think that's why there's a lot of fascination with like serial killers, right? Because like, holy shit, like Jeffrey Dahmer did do all that shit. Ted Bundy did do all that shit, right? And like, that it really happened. And it's creepy, right? Or there's two where it's like, there's no way this could happen in reality. Like, I know there aren't giant spiders in the real world, but that's creepy. Or like, I know Pennywise, I know there's no creepy killer clown that can shapeshift into anything and lives on the back of a turtle or whatever the fuck. Like, I know that's not real, but it's cool.
But do you remember, like, I don't know if it would be considered a creepypasta or not, but there was a trend for a while a few years back where people were like dressing up as clowns and like hanging out the edge of like woods and like scaring the piss out of people.
Those people.
Yeah.
But to like with Pennywise specifically, my fear of Pennywise isn't tied to him being a clown. I fully understand and respect there are people out there who are creeped out by clowns. I get it. The makeup is weird and unnatural. It's very pasty white, and then like all you see are the lips. It's real creepy. My fear with Pennywise is more, he can eat me.
Right.
Right. Like,
and he wants to.
He wants to eat me with this big mouth, like his big unnatural mouth, right? So I know that Pennywise can't exist in real life, right? So that's a supernatural fear that can't be replicated.
Right.
So with those two frames of mind for what horror and horror stories can be, I wonder if it's like with those creepypastas that do first person narratives, I've noticed at least that there's a trend where they want to make it sound like, oh, this really happened. Like Abandoned by Disney, it was written in a way where it's like, dude, this really happened. Like I couldn't write about this for years, and now I'm writing about it because I finally processed it and like can think about it again. So I think the reason why maybe like Daly, you brought up these other like existential ones, right? Is that with those, they aren't pretending like this really happened. Oh my, like I'm writing it down for the first time, and like I'm the only one who saw this, but you have to believe me, man. Instead, it's kind of like it's just written, like with Russian Sleep Experiment, Yeah, it like I think because it's not first person, you don't have to worry, like you don't think so hard about like, oh, the writer's trying to sell a story to me. You just read the story. I'm curious, do you guys think that there's something there that like with our first person creepypasta is not as interesting as third person ones, or is that just like a me thing?
So I think something like the Russian Sleep Experiment is interesting because it almost reads closer to like a Wikipedia article or something, right? Where it's like, yeah, you're just reading something out of a history book, and like this is just something that happened. If you put that in my history book, I mean, minus like maybe the more extreme like superhuman parts, like could almost completely believe that yeah, that's absolutely something that happened. There was a lot of crazy shit happening in the middle of the 20th century. So but I think there are I think it comes down with the first person stories, it comes down to the stakes, right? and the content of the story itself. Like one of my personal favorite creepypastas is Ben Drowned. I like Ben Drowned a lot. And obviously it goes a little off the rails. It's a little bit like you have to suspend disbelief or whatever. It's a little out there, but the whole story and all of it feels like relatively realistic. Like I found this random cartridge at this garage sale. Like nobody else was at this garage sale because it was like garage sale day, but there was people within shouting distance. This old man that was like seemed a little off kilter showed me this cartridge, and it just was a great cartridge with no label on it that said Majora. So kid slaps in the cartridge, right, and ends up basically being a haunted version of Majora's Mask, where this kid Ben, apparently his ghost like haunts the cartridge, and it curses whoever plays that version of the game through a bunch of creepy events happening in the game that you can read about. But a lot of that stuff sounds like, I mean, it's a lot of it's stuff that could actually happen. Like I could go to a garage sale and buy a cartridge off a sketchy old dude, and that game could be a ROM hack. Like all that stuff, you can make that happen in the game. You know what I'm saying? Like it's completely possible. In fact, there's people that actually took Ben Drowned and ran with it, right? And actually created like in like a hacked version of Majora's Mask that recreates a lot of what the guy said he saw in this hacked version. So a lot of that stuff, like, yeah, there's a lot to back it up that makes it feel like that it could be real. So I think that's all that is to say. It boils down to the content, how the story concludes, etc., how it's told.
Yeah. For me, I think because I unfortunately have like low expectations for the way that people behave toward each other these days. A lot of the I know. A lot of the like spooky, scary content I listen to around this time of the year, where it's like stories as read by Corpse Husband on YouTube. He reads a lot of like true scary stories that happened here, or like best creepypastas of whatever year. That rhymed. But the ones that are like super like just, I'm not trying to make you believe me, I'm just writing this, it's just out there, it's kind of like its own standalone short scary story, I feel better about reading, actually, because I don't have to think about like, oh man, yeah, this happened because people are terrible to each other. I don't have to think about like in the Russian sleep experiment of it is its own fictional thing, versus like reading a real horror story about like when after the atomic bombs went off in Japan, scientists kept one of the victims alive for much longer than they should have, just to study how long it would take for him to die. That's its own terrifying story, but it comes with guilt, whereas the just written ones of the genre today, there's no guilt. I guess it's guilt-free reading.
Yeah, you come to it because it's fiction, is what you're saying.
Like you know immediately that's not real.
Right.
Yeah, I want to not believe is the situation, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think creepypastas are interesting in that, to bring back that analogy that I had earlier with telling creepy stories around the campfire, right? Usually there's a sort of like, no, dude, this really happened, bro. Like Teen Wolf, he was at my school, man. Like that really fucking happened, right? Like there's the element of I'm trying to tell you something that is totally rooted in reality. But the moment that you understand something is creepypasta, it's like you, in a weird way, because you know it's fake, you can suspend your disbelief, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm more ready for, okay, tell me about the skinwalker in the woods. That you have made up for me today, as opposed to, no, dude, my cousin's best friend's weed dealer was in the woods one time, and no, you lost me.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in and around an area that we definitely, in Ohio, anyone from Ohio will tell you that we really like our urban legends there. Daily, I'm sure in Indiana that there I don't know, is there a lot of Indiana urban legends?
Yeah, we got a couple where I'm from. There's some various haunted places and don't go here at night, don't go there, don't say this word at 3 a.m., that kind of thing.
Places like Indianapolis.
Just the entire capital of the state. Yes. Don't go there. Don't say shit at 3 a.m.
I mean, Gary's the obvious answer, guys. I mean, come on.
That's true too.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Well, so like I guess like before even creepypastas were a thing, like the local urban legends were a big thing, and we had a lot of ghost stories that were like kind of sounded like they were based in reality. Like one of my favorites from back home was always the story of Gore Orphanage, which is a little so there's a road right outside of Vermilion, Ohio, in between Vermilion and Amherst, called Gore Orphanage Road, ironically enough. And the reason why it's called that is because the story goes that in the early 20th century, there was an orphanage in the middle of these woods, only with a small like driveway / trail in order to get back to it. Well, around that time, it caught fire with both the kids and the counselors inside, or the people that ran the place, and all of them ended up dying in just a huge breath of fire. So, since then, there's been several reports that the place is haunted, and to this day, you can still go to that area and see what looks to be the foundation of the orphanage. And so I think the first time I heard it was my dad told me the story, and it was one of those things where like, you know, there were reports of like screaming children off in the distance and cries and you know, bloody handprints, or people would actually, I think the most popular report was people would come back to their cars and there would be kids' handprints all over their windows.
I think I've seen that on a ghost hunting show where it was like, let's baby powder the bumper and see if like handprints show up.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the most popular one, but it was like, I've even seen that though on the internet exist as kind of its own creepypasta in a sense. People would tell their own stories, and
that'd be interesting as like a kind of almost anthropology project to see like where this very localized urban legend from Vermilion, Ohio has then, because one person posted it on like an old GeoCities site in, 1994, and then it spread via everything else that is the internet from there.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my dad, like, he talked about it. Like, I mean, that was a thing when he was a kid, was like he would hear about it. So this was back even before the internet. So like, yeah, it's just crazy how that stuff spreads. And I mean, people to this day still say they see creepy shit. Not even necessarily ghosts. Like, people have reported like cultists, and
it's always
yeah.
How does one identify a cultist?
The White Hoods.
Yeah.
Oh no. Are they?
Yeah, rural Ohio.
So when you say you saw a ghost in the woods, you mean to say you saw a dude in a white robe with a pointy hat hanging out?
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I think most commonly there was like druggies in the area and stuff like that. It's kind of like a back alley road to get there, and it dead ends eventually once you cross the bridge across the Vermilion River. So like people say like don't go there after dark because usually it's just it's just a bad crowd that hangs out in the area, I guess.
The cultists and the KKK and the drug dealers, etc. They're just all hanging out,
etc.
Yeah, me and a group of my friends went somewhere. We actually went out looking for the place, like the actual orphanage, and we came out empty-handed, unfortunately. But we did find the road, and it's definitely a very sketchy-looking road, a very creepy-looking area. But it turns out the entrance to get back to the place is out behind a park ranger's house, and he is fully aware of why people show up to his place, and he is not happy when people show up.
That was gonna be my next question. Like, how does he feel about the local legends? Not too good, huh? So
I think he kind of like half takes care of it because it's technically like private property, stuff like that. So yeah, the closest we got was like we were walking towards the trail, and then we saw the lights flip on in the house. Then we took off running. We got back in our cars and left.
You should have talked to him. What if he was like, Gore Orphanage? I haven't heard that name in 50 years.
Yeah, no, the first thing I would have heard from him was from a shotgun, probably, because that's what I did a bunch of reading before we went out, and apparently like people reported like, dude, fucking, he doesn't screw around, dude. Like he'll fucking pull a gun on you, like.
And that's the real horror story.
Yeah, exactly. The debaucherous kids like to hang out back there, apparently, so they really cracked down on
Debaucherous.
kids hanging out.
Word.
Yeah. But that's my story. That's my my own little creepypasta, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ohio is home to some,
Creepypasta.
like, wasn't the oh my god, that Stephen King movie, that Shawshank, wasn't that filmed in a prison or abandoned prison in Ohio?
Yeah, Ohio State Penitentiary in Mansfield, Ohio. Yeah, it's a big, old, haunted prison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's like the Las Vegas for ghost hunters, or so I hear.
Where
Yeah,
they
well,
can gamble with the ghosts.
They can gamble with their lives because it's scary there, I guess.
That sounds like a slogan that would be on the front of a horror novel.
They gamble with their
With their lives. Yeah. Well, and there's also a big, scary, abandoned insane asylum down in Athens, Ohio, that people still like to visit. Yeah. So there's just a lot of scary places over.
Yeah,
in
and then just south of Ohio, or like southeast of Ohio, you got Mothman. So I don't know. I guess Ohio, scariest place in America. I don't know.
Yeah. Either that, or we just get really bored over in the Midwest and a little parts of the South.
Yeah.
So you just make up scary shit.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
joke about how there are more astronauts from Ohio than anywhere else because they want to get out of out of there because it's so boring. But what if it's actually just really scary? Ooh, scary Ohio.
Scary. Yeah, fucking
no,
Salem.
my favorite,
Fuck Salem.
Oh.
Maine. Maryland.
No.
Places are fucking
My
scary.
favorite creepypasta is that it's just a tweet, and it's like astronauts getting back, and it's like NASA employees, well, you're early. Astronaut loading gun, moon's haunted. What? Moon's haunted. Gets back in shuttle.
I've seen that before. It's pretty good.
Moon's haunted. Gotta go.
What if? We don't know.
We don't know.
There's a lot of things we don't know. One of the things we don't know is how many people are allergic to the moon, because one of 12 people who have been on the moon was allergic to the moon. So we don't know, is that an anomaly or is that a common thing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying the moon does some fucky stuff to our oceans.
It's the moon ghosts pulling the water.
It's the moon.
It's the moon ghosts.
It's the ghosts of the moon and moons that have been.
Look, gravity is just a theory. Ghosts, that's some real shit.
What if it's just the ghosts pulling us down? What if gravity is the ghosts? What if
It's
ghosts
just
are
one
gravity?
big ghost.
All right, guys. So it sounds like we're kind of winding down here. Do you guys have anything else about creepypastas that you'd like to talk about?
I have a quick one if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, please do.
It's one of my favorites to share. It is also spawned of 4chan. It's one of these good old green texts, which I think kind of also, like many creepypastas, have a life of their own. Yeah, it's that brief. It goes a little something like this. Let me get my best
Tell us, Anon.
literature student voice on. So man and girl
Daily is now
go
Anon.
out to drive under moonlight. They stop on side of a road. He turned to his girl and say, "Baby, I love you very much." "What is it, honey?" "Our car is broken down. I think the engine is broken. I'll walk and get some more fuel." "Okay, I'll stay here and look after our stereo. There have been news report of stereos being stolen." "Good idea. Keep the doors locked no matter what. I love you, sweaty." So the guy left to get full for the car. After 2 hours, the girls say, "Where is my baby? He was supposed to be let me back by now." Then the girl hear a scratching sound and a voice say, "Let me in." The girl doesn't do it, and then after a while she go to sleep. The next morning she wakes up and find her boyfriend still not there. She gets out to check, and man door hand hook car door.
Goosebumps.
Man,
Goose-
I'm just
Goosebumps. It's even scarier than the Jack Black movie.
Oh, that
But
is
wasn't he in
right.
Goosebumps?
He was R.L. Stein.
right.
He
Holy fuck.
was R.L. Stein.
Like that was like
Yeah.
like that was like Windows spinning circle sort of like.
Yeah. Almost as bad as his Gulliver's Travels movie, if you remember that too.
Oh God, I never watched that. I
Oh.
love Jack Black and I never watched that.
Poor thing.
They're
That
both
happened.
real bad.
Oh boy.
I don't know. I mean, the Lavender Town thing, that was really weird. I didn't
Ooh.
realize that was a creepypasta. I just thought it was like, I don't know, a weird urban legend that was on the internet, which I guess is what creepypastas are.
yeah,
um,
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but that whole thing that, like the Lavender Town Pokemon song made a lot of kids commit suicide. Like, that's just weird.
Dun, 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 dun. Now we have to have a trigger warning for this
And there
episode.
goes all of our listeners.
Sorry, don't listen to
all three of them.
Lavender Town.
Hmm.
Thanks for listening, Mom.
Uh-oh.
Thanks, Mom. Don't listen anymore.
Well, all right, y'all. What do you say we wrap up this extra spoopy episode of Everything in Poderation?
I'm scared.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have anything else. Boo!
Oh,
Jump scare.
Oh.
Jump scare.
jump scare warning.
I'm not Robert anymore. I am I am the Slender Man. I've been possessed by the Slender of men.
Robert, now you have to put a jump scare warning in the timestamp notes.
Yep.
Okay, end this hell. Oh, don't go trick or treating this weekend.
Oh yeah. Don't go
Don't-
trick or treating. Maybe don't catch coronavirus, and if you do, make sure you're social distancing and washing your hands properly, and wash your candy.
Mhm.
Wash it thoroughly with hot water
Yeah,
and soap, and then just mash that stuff right into your mouth.
Yeah, but also make sure there's no razor blades in your Snickers bar.
Mm.
Look what I found in my candy, guys. It's gun.
I just realized, is this the first year? Is this the first trick or treating where masks have been in vogue for months before Halloween?
Hey, LMAO.
But like for real though, but you'd have to imagine though, right? Like there's definitely going to be houses that are handing out masks and hand sanitizer.
I wonder if there are people out there who wouldn't want their kids to wear a Halloween costume mask because wearing a mask is now political.
Holy fuck.
Whoa.
Holy fuck. There's
There's going to
can of
be
worms.
discourse. I'm ready for the discourse. There's going to be probably lots of think pieces published about Halloween in 2020. What do we do now?
Oh God, unfortunately, I've seen some people come up with some like Rube Goldberg machine type things to like give candy to kids through their gates and like from their porch and stuff, where they like kind of like it's like a noodle slide sort of deal where they're like taking a Snickers bar and it slides down into their little
Nagashi
pumpkin.
Somen except candy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little Rube Goldberg machine that throws Snickers out of your front door.
I want like a fucking like pitching machine, right, for baseballs,
Oh
but
my
like
God.
it shoots candy, so it shoots a Snickers bar like 90 miles an hour.
So we're talking about a Snickers gun.
Yeah, Snickers gun.
What if candy but gun?
Candy
Only
I
in
mean,
America.
People love t-shirt cannons, so why not a candy cannon? I'm just
Mhm.
saying. Candy cannon sounds like a fucking euphemism. Just jumping ahead of it.
That's my favorite sex position.
Name of this episode.
The candy cannon. All right. So just really quick before we wrap up, just a quick housekeeping thing. Just wanted to shout out our Twitter at Everything in Pod, because Daily puts a lot of effort into her posts and she likes to repost
Aw.
dank memes. I know it's a little early for the show, and so it's not like super crazy with content, but Daily's always done a really good job with our Twitter. And then you can also email us at everythinginpod@gmail. I think that's the email, right, Robert?
Mm-hmm. It should be in the
Everything-
show notes.
Yeah, and it also should be in the show notes if you guys have any questions for us or would like to make any sort of inquiries or anything of that nature.
Suggestions.
And
We are
and,
open books.
if you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button and all that shit. But also
Yes, and
share your favorite creepypasta. Email it to us. I don't know.
Robert, you got to tell the people to fucking subscribe.
No, I don't want. I only want the likes.
subscribe,
nice.
please. It helps us out so much if you would just go ahead right now and hit that subscribe button. If you got this far, I would assume you guys like us enough to finish an episode of this podcast.
Nah, dude, it's all about that hate listening, man. That's what's hip and cool nowadays.
Right now, we're averaging like at least a dislike per video, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Hate on us.
All right, y'all. This has been Everything in Poderation. Thank you so much, and happy Halloween. Tax evasion.
Benjamin Franklin, I have syphilis.
I'm your scary